Right now, there are millions of drivers on American roads listening to their car make a noise. A knock, a tick, a hiss, a whine, and they're telling themselves the same thing. It's probably nothing. I'll check it later. And later never comes. Until the morning they go out to their driveway, turn the key, and something catastrophic happens. Something that costs them $4, $5, sometimes $8,000. And the worst part? When they finally sit down across from a mechanic and ask, "How long had this been going on?" The answer is almost always the same. "You had about 30 days. That's what today is about. Because I've spent over 2 decades underneath cars, inside engines, talking to mechanics and engineers who've seen this exact story play out hundreds of times. And what I've learned is this: your engine almost never fails without warning. It talks to you first. The problem is, most drivers don't speak the language. Today, I'm going to teach you that language. This video isn't for gearheads. It's for the everyday driver who bought a reliable car, takes care of it the best they know how, and just wants to get where they're going without a disaster. It's for anyone who's ever sat in a waiting room at a repair shop, wondering how a problem they didn't even know they had just turned into a $3,000 bill. Here's the truth most shops will never tell you. The difference between a $500 fix and a $5,000 fix is almost always time. Catch it early, and you're looking at a part and a few hours of labor. Ignore it, and that same problem takes down 3 or 4 other components with it. I've personally seen engines fail that had no business failing. Clean oil changes, regular maintenance, well-cared-for vehicles. And every single time, weeks before the big failure, the engine was sending a signal, a noise, a vibration, a change, and nobody caught it. Today I'm walking you through 7 specific engine noises, what each one sounds like, what's actually happening inside your engine when you hear it, and how much time you have before it turns catastrophic. By the end of this video, you are going to hear your car differently. I promise you that. Let's get into it. I want to start with the most serious one, because if you have this noise right now, you need to understand the urgency immediately. It sounds like someone inside your engine block with a heavy rubber mallet hitting something metal in a slow, steady rhythm. It's deep, and when you press the accelerator, it gets louder and faster. Some people describe it as a thud. Others say it's like a slow woodpecker, but much heavier, coming from low in the engine. That noise is called rod knock, and in over 20 years of working on engines, I have never once seen rod knock go away on its own. Here's what's happening. Inside your engine, connecting rods link your pistons to your crankshaft. At the end of each rod is a bearing, a precision-machined piece of metal that lets the rod rotate around the crankshaft on a microscopic film of oil, thousands of times per minute. When that bearing wears out, from low oil levels, degraded oil, or just high mileage, that film disappears. Now you've got raw metal slamming against raw metal every time a piston fires. When the bearing first starts to fail, it's a fixable problem. But keep driving on it, and that connecting rod will eventually break. And when a connecting rod breaks inside a running engine, it punches through the engine block like a bullet. At that point, there is no repair. You need an entirely new engine. The engine that needed a $1,200 rod bearing job just became a $6,000 replacement. Get it to a mechanic immediately. No highway driving, no hard acceleration. Rod knock is not a monitor it noise. You have maybe 30 days before catastrophic failure becomes a real possibility. Not every deep knock is rod knock. A loose torque converter or exhaust manifold issue can mimic it. But rod knock is deep, rhythmic, louder under load, and comes from low in the block. If you're ever unsure, get it diagnosed immediately. Because the next noise sounds almost innocent, but it hides one of the most common causes of complete engine failure in modern cars. This one fools people constantly, because it seems to go away. You start your car on a cold morning and hear a rapid ticking from the top of the engine. Quick, high-pitched, almost like a sewing machine. Then the engine warms up and it disappears. You pull out of the driveway and everything sounds normal, so you think, problem solved. What actually happened is the opposite of problem solved. That ticking comes from your valve train, your lifters, or in modern engines, your variable valve timing components. When your engine sits overnight, oil drains down to the pan. The upper engine sits relatively dry. The moment you start it, the oil pump begins circulating, but it takes 15 to 45 seconds for full pressure to reach the top of the engine. During that window, metal moves against metal. That's the tick. In a healthy engine with fresh oil, that tick should last 10 to 15 seconds at most. But when it lasts longer than 30 seconds, or gets louder every morning, or slowly stops going away after warm-up, you've got a developing problem. On virtually every car built in the last 15 years, variable valve timing components are controlled by oil pressure. They're extremely sensitive to oil quality. Skip oil changes, run oil too long, and those VVT solenoids gum up with sludge. They tick. Then they fail. A VVT solenoid runs $200 to $400 to fix. Ignore it, and the timing chain gets involved. A timing chain replacement on a modern engine is $1,500 to $3,000. Check your oil level right now. If it's low, find out why. Check the dipstick. If it's black or smells burnt, you need an oil change today. If the ticking continues after fresh oil, have the VVT system inspected and ask for any stored diagnostic codes. The disappearing tick is not harmless. It's a warning. And the next noise takes that same gradual problem and turns it into something that can strand you on the highway without a moment of notice. This one doesn't sound violent at all. It sounds almost electronic, a high-pitched whine that increases in pitch and volume when you press the gas. It follows engine RPM, higher and louder as you rev up, and it's been slowly getting worse over months. Most people assume it's a belt issue. Sometimes it is. But the version I'm most concerned about points to something inside the engine, the oil pump. Your oil pump is the single most critical component in your entire engine. Every moving part depends on it maintaining adequate pressure at all times. It runs from the moment you start the car to the moment you shut it off. As pumps age, from dirty oil, low levels, and years of cold starts, the internal gears wear, clearances open up, and the pump struggles to maintain pressure. A pump working harder than it should will whine. Here's what most drivers don't realize. Your oil pressure warning light is not a real-time sensor. It's a low-pressure switch that doesn't trigger until pressure drops dangerously low, sometimes as low as 4 psi. A healthy engine idles at 25 to 65 psi, so your pump can be running at half the pressure it should be, your bearings and camshafts starving for lubrication, and your dashboard shows nothing. A clogged oil pickup screen can cause the same whine. That screen sits in the oil pan filtering debris before it reaches the pump. Years of sludge can restrict it until the pump is working overtime just to pull oil through. If you're hearing an RPM-dependent whine from the engine, get a mechanical oil pressure test done, not a code scan, an actual gauge screwed into the block. It takes 20 minutes and tells you exactly where your pressure stands. A pickup screen cleaning runs a few $100s. An oil pump replacement is $400 to $900. Compare either of those to the cost of a seized engine, and it's an easy decision. And here's where it gets interesting. Because the next noise is one almost every driver has heard, but almost nobody understands what it's really saying. You park the car, shut off the engine, and hear it, a soft hissing from under the hood. Maybe a small wisp of steam, a faint sweet smell, almost like burnt syrup. And your first thought is, probably just the engine cooling down, normal stuff. Sometimes it is, but the version I want you to know about is a hiss you can hear while the engine is still running. A hiss with that sweet coolant smell, possibly paired with a temperature gauge that's been creeping just a little higher than normal over the past few weeks. That's a coolant leak. And a slow coolant leak is one of the most patient, invisible killers of modern engines. Here's how it plays out. A hose develops a small crack. A gasket begins to weep. A plastic reservoir gets a hairline fracture. At first, you lose a few tablespoons of coolant a week. The gauge barely moves. The car seems fine. But coolant levels are slowly dropping, and coolant is what keeps your aluminum engine from overheating. Modern aluminum engines have extremely tight temperature tolerances. When they overheat, the head gasket, the seal between your cylinder head and block, is almost always the first to go. A blown head gasket runs $1,500 to $3,000. If overheating continues, the cylinder head itself warps. Now you're into machine shop territory, $4,000 to $5,000. In severe cases, the block cracks and the engine is done, all from a slow hiss that seemed like nothing. Check your coolant reservoir when the engine is completely cold. Look for staining or dried crust around hoses and fittings. Even a faint greenish residue is a leak in progress. Have a cooling system pressure test done. It's inexpensive and can find leaks invisible to the naked eye. A hose or clamp caught today is $20 to $100. The same leak ignored for 30 days until an overheat event? You might be looking at a repair that costs more than the car is worth. The next noise causes more catastrophic failures than almost anything else I've seen. And the reason it's so dangerous is because it sounds almost harmless. This one is very specific. If you drive a car from roughly the last 15 years, pay close attention. It's a rattling sound, higher pitched than a knock, almost like marbles in a metal can or a chain dragging across sheet metal. It happens at cold startup in the morning, lasts 2 to 10 seconds, then quiets down as the engine warms up. That's timing chain rattle, and it's the beginning of a very expensive countdown. Your timing chain synchronizes your crankshaft and camshafts. It's what keeps your valves opening and closing in perfect time with your pistons. When timing goes off, even slightly, a piston can strike an open valve. That's called valve contact. It can bend valves, damage pistons, and destroy the top of your engine in a fraction of a second. Timing chains are supposed to last the life of the engine. The reason they don't always comes down to one thing: oil maintenance. The chain is tensioned by a hydraulic tensioner powered by oil pressure. Dirty oil, skipped changes, low levels, and that tensioner starves. The chain loses tension and starts slapping against plastic timing guides. Over time, those guides wear down and break. When a guide breaks, the chain can jump timing. In many modern engines, that means bent valves instantly. A timing chain replacement before failure runs $800 to $2,000. After a valve contact event, you're looking at $3,000 minimum, often more. Fresh oil is the first step. If the rattle clears up, the chain and guides may still be in reasonable shape. If it persists, get a timing chain inspection and ask specifically about chain stretch and guide condition. Also ask whether your vehicle has any known timing chain technical service bulletins. Some Honda, Ford EcoBoost, and GM engines have documented histories with this exact problem. Don't let a 2-second morning rattle become background noise you tune out. That sound is a clock ticking down. I want to come back to a ticking sound, but this one is different. This isn't the startup tick that disappears when the engine warms up. This is a tick that's always present when the engine is warm. One that started faint months ago and has been slowly getting louder. It's a rapid tapping from the top of the engine. Some people say it sounds like a typewriter. Others describe it as fast, mechanical clicking that never fully goes away. On older vehicles, pre-2000, this is often a valve adjustment issue. Valve clearances drift on engines with mechanical adjustable valves. A valve adjustment service, $200 to $400, and the tap goes away. But on most modern engines, there are no manually adjustable valves. Clearances are maintained automatically by hydraulic lifters. And when those start ticking, the stakes are higher. Each lifter contains a tiny internal piston that uses oil pressure to maintain zero clearance against the camshaft. When lifters get varnished up from old oil or simply wear out, they lose that contact. They tick. And a lifter that's fully collapsed creates a situation where its valve isn't opening properly. That cylinder isn't breathing right, and the cam lobe directly above that lifter is now making metal-to-metal contact, wearing down with every revolution. On certain GM, Chrysler, and import engines, lifter failures have become almost common at higher mileages. I've seen camshaft damage on engines with only 150,000 miles, caused entirely by oil changes that were a few thousand miles overdue, repeatedly. The outside of the engine looked clean. The cam lobes were being slowly destroyed. Lifter replacement on a V8 is a multi-thousand-dollar job. If the camshaft is also damaged, add another $500 to $1,500 on top of that. Fresh oil first. If the tick improves, you may have bought yourself some time. If it doesn't, get it diagnosed specifically. Ask which cylinder bank the tick is coming from and whether it's isolated to one lifter or systemic. Every mile on a confirmed lifter tick is another mile of cam lobe wearing thinner. The clock and the tick are running together on this one. The last noise I want to cover is probably the most misunderstood of all. Because it doesn't sound like an engine problem. It sounds like something in your kitchen. Have you ever heard your car make a sound like a coffee maker? A bubbling, gurgling, percolating sound, sometimes from the dashboard area, sometimes from under the hood, maybe with a fluctuating temperature gauge or a faint smell of coolant? Most people assume it's a heater issue. Some never even mention it to a mechanic because it doesn't sound serious. It is serious, and it's one of the most urgent noises on this list. That gurgling is trapped air inside your cooling system. Air has no business being in there. Your cooling system is a closed, pressurized loop. Coolant circulates through the engine, picks up heat, releases it at the radiator, and recirculates. It runs under pressure, around 14 to 16 psi, because pressure raises the coolant's boiling point, letting the system handle extreme temperatures safely. When there's air in the system, the seal has been broken. Either coolant leaked out and air replaced it, or combustion gases from inside the engine are pushing into the coolant passages. That second scenario means one thing: a failing head gasket. When a head gasket starts to go, it creates a pathway between the combustion chamber and the adjacent coolant passage. Burning gases get forced into the cooling system every time a cylinder fires. They create bubbles and air pockets. They superheat the coolant locally, and they start acidifying the fluid, slowly damaging the radiator from the inside. In the early stages, your temperature gauge may only fluctuate slightly. Coolant level drops a little at a time. Some is being pushed into the cylinder and burned. You might notice faint white exhaust smoke you attribute to cold weather. Meanwhile, the gasket is getting worse. The head is warping. And what would have been a $1,200 repair becomes $3,000 to $4,000 when the cylinder head needs machining, or worse. The test is called a combustion leak test. A mechanic draws air from the cooling system through a chemical that changes color if combustion gases are present. 20 minutes, $50 to $100. It tells you definitively what you're dealing with. Don't add stop leak and move on. Those products clog cooling passages and heater cores and turn one problem into three. Get the proper diagnosis while the repair is still manageable. So let's bring this together. 7 noises, 7 signals, 7 chances to catch a problem before it destroys your engine. A deep, rhythmic knock that gets louder under load, rod knock. 30 days before catastrophic risk becomes real. Get it diagnosed now. A rapid tick at cold startup that takes too long to go away. Your VVT system and valve train warning you about oil quality. Check your level today. A high-pitched whine that follows engine RPM. A possible oil pump issue. Get a real mechanical pressure test, not just a code scan. A hiss while running with a sweet smell and a climbing temperature gauge. A coolant leak counting down toward an overheat. Pressure test this week. A rattling chain sound on cold startup. Timing chain slap. A manageable repair now. A catastrophic one if you wait. A persistent tapping from the top of a warm engine. Lifter and potential camshaft wear. Every mile is making it worse. And a gurgling or bubbling from the cooling system with any gauge fluctuation. Possible head gasket failure. Get a combustion leak test immediately. Here's what I want you to carry with you. Your engine communicates in a language you can learn. These aren't mysteries, they're messages. The most valuable thing you can do for your car, more than any premium fuel or additive, is to actually listen to it. Know what normal sounds like so you recognize when something changes. The difference between a car that reaches 250,000 miles and one that dies at 90,000 is almost never luck. It's almost never a defect. It's almost always this. One driver heard the warning and acted, and the other one waited. Don't be the one who waited. If this helped you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps other drivers find this information. And if you know someone with a high-mileage car or a noise they've been ignoring, send this to them. Next week, I'm getting into something that's been bothering me for a long time. The dirty business of coolant flushes. When your car actually needs one, when the shop is selling you one you don't need, and the one warning sign in your coolant that most drivers and even some mechanics are completely misreading. It's an expensive mistake. And next week, I'm setting the record straight. I'll see you then.